So welcome to my lesson. Thanks for having me, and thanks Larissa for inviting me to be part of the summit. I'm very excited. We're doing a mandala today, and I'm just going to show you, these are a couple of mandalas that I've done before, and I'm just going to show you how I use a mandala in healing. We'll just go through some simple steps as to how I pick my symbols and colours and text, and then how I draw a mandala. So we're just going to do a simple mandala. It can be as complex or as easy as you like. So what I'm starting with, I've just written down a few things about my mandala, about the colours. Now for this one I'm choosing blues and greens. I've got phthalo blue and phthalo green. I'll probably bring in a bit of cobalt turquoise light, and I'll bring in a bit of white. So I've chosen blue and green because green is the heart chakra for kindness and love and self-compassion, and the indigo or the blue is the throat chakra, and that's all about having a voice, whether it's a voice to the collective or voicing your own thoughts to yourself and actually acknowledge them, acknowledging your feelings and emotions. I've chosen a stamp today, a foam stamp with little arrows on it. The arrows symbolise to me direction, clear direction, and I've just written down a few notes about some symbols that I usually draw and why. So I've got spirals that symbolise movement to me. I'll put in some hearts, flowers, and for blooming, blossoming and unfolding. Heart is for love and self-compassion, and the lotus symbolises the heart chakra. Now these are just notes. I've given you a little PDF as to little questions and prompts that you can ask yourself before you draw your mandala, and these are the questions that I've answered. I have a quote in mind, but sometimes if I'm not sure I'll leave it till the end. So that's why I haven't written that at the moment. I might use my favourite quote as we've discussed in our interview, but for now I won't. So what I'm going to do is just do a little swatch of colours. So I'm just going to put the green out on the palette, and the blues. This is just for me to just see if these are the colours that I have in my head. So what I've done before I decided what I wanted to do is I sat down and did a meditation, and I'm just going to do put some water on the paper. This is just 300 GSM watercolour paper, and I'm just going to do the blue. I quite like that blue. Just do some green. Yep, that's what I want in the blues and the greens. See if that blends with both of them. They're the colour schemes that I want. And then what I'll do is just like a little, just a little reference page is I always sit down and I figure out my symbols and doodling. So I've got my spirals. I've got a lotus, and this is just a very simple lotus. I've got my heart, and I always tend to do these just quick little daisies. I do like a little S spiral. I tend to do these little curly spirals. I've got an arrow. So this for me helps me work out. So while I would do that, I also just do this at the same time, but I'm just showing you now. And I would just write little notes here, just dot points as to why I've picked these symbols. So let's get started, and we will I'm doing it on a bigger piece of paper, so I've just got a hot press watercolour pad and it's 300 GSM. This is an A3 sheet, so I've got plenty of room. Now, how I start a mandala is I have a great little tool. It comes in a clear plastic Perspex-y sort of thing, and it's got little holes in it at 1 centimetre apart. What I did with mine, because I kept putting it down and I kept losing it on my desk, is I just cover it with alcohol inks and let it dry, and now I can find it anywhere I go. But the way that I use this, because I always used to use a compass and end up with a hole in the middle of the paper, and now what I do is, this is the way that I find, so I find the centre of the paper. Need a bigger ruler to find the centre of the page. So there's the middle. Because I've done this, I've done it on a bigger sheet of paper so you can cut it down. I'm not too particular about finding the exact middle of the paper. So we've got a little dot there. Now all you need is 2 sharp pencils. So I've got one to sit in the middle, and stick that in the hole in the middle, and as you can see, this just works as easy as a compass, but it's actually a lot easier because you don't have to keep changing the compass around. You just leave the pen there. I'm only lightly pressing down so that it can swing around, glide over the paper. And you can do as many lines in here as you like. If you don't have one of these tools, which I can send out to people, you can just use a compass. Now, I a lot of the times do just a rustic mandala, so I'll probably put in 1 or 2 lines, but I'm just showing you what this tool can do for now. So I lightly rub over it, so it just gives me a faint outline. So that I can see where the lines are, but because I'm going to do a paint layer, I don't want to see all the lines. So now what we're going to do is just grab that watercolour brush again, and we're just going to paint this with water. And what I'm going to do now is, by doing this paint layer in the background, I'm bringing in the feeling of the throat chakra and the heart chakra. So this helps me just get into the right headspace. It's a great practice in mindfulness. And it looks like I'm covering up all those pencil marks, but you will be able to see it. When we've finished. So I will go out to the edge of the paper, because I have done this in a journal page before, and I would actually use the entire rectangle and I would write words in it as well, which we can do. Bring in some green. I love the vividness of these free flow paints and the way that they blend like watercolour. So I'm just randomly putting them down at the moment. I'm working quite quickly while the paper is wet. And I am covering all of the paper so that it's uniformly wet. And then what I'll do is I've just got a spray bottle and a fine mister. Just going to spray it a bit because I do like all that speckly action that happens. And I'll put a little bit of alcohol and I just drip this. Just acts as a bit of a resist. If there's too much water, you won't see a lot of these mushroomy marks, cauliflower marks that comes out, so you just let it dry a little bit. Mine's not too bad. I'll just shake it around. And I will dry that completely now. So that's nice and dry. You can see that when it starts to curl up, if you turn it over and dry the back, it will actually flatten it out again. Now I can faintly see the lines here. But what I might do is just put them back in a little bit, and this is where I switch over to the this is a Pilot, oh that's the pen, this is the Pilot Eno pencil, I think, yes this is the one. This has got a light blue lead. I do have one with an orange lead as well, so I might use that actually. And I'll just put some of these lines back so I can see, I think, oh, famous last words that you could still see it, hey? I've just rubbed off a little bit too much, but that's okay. I can see the lines here. Right, there's the middle. Down the middle. So we'll just put some of these lines back again, just for the purposes of the lesson. So I pressed it a little bit too hard then and broke the lead. Now what I want to do with this is I'm going to bring in this stamp. I probably should have done that before I did that, so let's just try that again. I'm using a sponge brush. And I've just put the Cobalt Turquoise Light out on my palette, and I'm just going to put that on the sponge brush. So I'm following along the same sort of idea that I had with this orange mandala, and this is the little stamp in the background. So there's no rhyme or reason to it. I'm not being too precise with where I put it, but I do want the stamp to be mainly in the mandala. You could actually put it like I just did in the middle. And then I just stamp around the outside. I don't reload with paint every time that I stamp. I like it to be a different variation in colour. So it's just a subtle background. And then what I'll do is I'll grab a brayer. So I've got a very well used brayer, and I'll use some white. Now you can skip this step if you don't want to soften it down a bit, but I just want to soften it a little bit. So I'm just rolling it through the brayer through the paint, so that there's not a lot of paint on there. And then I'm just going to lightly rub it over the surface. Now you can see that really softens it. Just use a little bit more. And it just ties all the layers underneath together. Just touch down lightly till you find out how heavy it's going to come out. Changing direction of my brayer so I don't get a lot of lines in the same direction. So I'm happy with that. That softened it very nicely. So I'm just going to quickly dry that again. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to put the paint palette away so that it's out of the way. And I'm going to start drawing my mandala. Now what I'm using, I used this the other day for the first time. It was a really nice pen. This is a Pilot High-Tech B7 grip. And sorry about the noise in the background. My neighbours decided to get a saw out and use it, so I can't do much about that. So what I'm going to do in the middle here, I think I might start with the lotus shape. So with these pencils, they're really good because you can rub them out. I've found the middle here, and I'm going to do the lotus shape. So I'll just do these in this direction so that it doesn't matter what direction you do it. Now, one thing that I do with my mandalas is turn the paper around. So probably for I don't pencil in all of the mandala, but I usually do just to start with, just so I've got a starting point. And then we'll go from there. So with this V grip pen, here we go. Okay. So I turn the paper as I go, because if you try and turn your wrist, while I'm not going for a copy of each shape directly, exactly the same size, you'll find that your wrist actually turns in a direction, and then you'll find all the petals going that way or that way when you want them actually coming out and facing out. This is where a mandala becomes really, it's a form of meditation, and I find it really good for calming. It centers my thoughts, and it helps me work things out. So sometimes I don't need to be this elaborate with the backgrounds. I'll just get my sketchbook out and I'll just start drawing some mandalas. If I can't figure something out at the time, or I'm having some challenges, yeah, the mandala really helps me do that. So I'll just fill in the little bits now. So you can tell it's not a perfect lotus, but it's inspired by a lotus. So your mandala can be any symbolism and shapes that you like. Now, what I do with this, what you can do also is draw horizontal and vertical lines. Sometimes, usually I'll do that actually, I might do that now. It'll help me just stay on track in that quadrant. So I might just do that. As you can see, I'm not measuring perfectly, it's just a guideline. So that I know in that quadrant, that's where I'm going. So if you wanted to be very precise, you could get your protractor out and measure angles and things like that. I have done that when I wanted something more precise, but for this exercise we won't. What I'm trying to do is give you something that's that is not supposed to be stressful. This is a healing tool. And then you just start layer by layer, drawing patterns. In the next layer, this is where you can bring in your words if you want to bring out a feeling in the mandala. This is a good way to incorporate your journaling results or your journaling itself. So for this one, I might write here, listen to your soul, its voice is clear when we are still and present. So these can be just little mantras. So in between these patterns, you can just do all these little mantras. That's what I'm going to do today. Now I need another little circle in there above the writing. So that's where I'm going to do the next line. And then I might do this little pattern. So this is where I use the guidelines of each quarter. It's to give me a jumping off point. And then I'll just eyeball the middle. Always turning so that you're doing your line towards or away from the center. Mandalas are great for the repetition. I find very soothing. I find very comforting. When I'm not talking to teach people a mandala, this is where I work all the thoughts out in my head. And I gain a lot of clarity. So you can see my mandalas are quite rustic. I'm not thinking too hard about size. I'm not measuring the size. I'm not worrying if they're sort of going over the other swirls. This is purely a healing tool today. Because I think sometimes it depends what sort of person you are. If sometimes being measured and perfect can put pressure on, sometimes it can be very soothing. So what I want you to do is just do whatever's comfortable for you. And if that means measuring out every line or every angle, that is what you do. Because this is your healing tool. All I'm giving you is an example of how I use it. And I want you to adapt it for what works for you. So with this one I might do, actually I'll tell you what we'll do. I'm going to fill those in. So the focus of this mandala is self-compassion and listening to my inner voice. So I'm going to put some words in here. That will remind me that that's what it's about. So I've got kindness, love, listen, and voice. Now I might come back and do some patterns in here, but for now I just get my mandala drawn with the dark layer and then I will come back. And sometimes I'll mix up the levels of the mandala. So I need another one. This is the beauty of this tool, is that you can go in and add layers. And you want another line, a guideline, you can just go and add it with this tool. Very easy to add. So I'm keeping with the spiral. mandala drawing is probably the best stress relief tool that I have. And just do some dots to join that up. And it doesn't mean that if you want to do some different symbols halfway through that you can't add them. This is all intuitive. And if I decided I didn't want the arrow, then I didn't have to do it. Just because you've done it on your little swatch to begin with and you're brainstorming doesn't mean that's what you have to do. This is no pressure. It's whatever what we want in this is for you to actually express what's going on in you, and it's a tool so that you get out of it what you need. And if that means changing direction, if that means using different symbols, if that means changing the colors, if that means changing the words that you have in here, your quote might change from when you first sat down till now. Something else will come to you. What this is about is you actually getting it out on paper and being able to use it, work through it, figure out things, get some clarity, express yourself, no matter what emotion that is. So what I might do here, what sort of symbol do I want now? I think I might still, actually this is when I can bring in I want a bit more of the I've got the petals here, but I might bring in the little daisy symbol that I have, this little daisy symbol here, or I could bring in a heart. Actually I might bring in the heart, I haven't used that yet, and I really want to use the heart, and I think that'll go well here. So I'm actually happy with just the text that I've got in here. I'm not sure whether I'll add another affirmation. I could write it around here if I want. While I'm figuring that out, I just add more. I go back and embellish the design where I think it needs it. So I'm just going back and embellishing. I think these little petal shapes need something else. Now I'm adding little flowers, shapes. I really love this black pen, it's writing over anything. So what I want to add in here is just some dots. I find the dots very grounding. I don't know if that's the symbolism of dots. I have no idea. I haven't looked that up, to be honest. But for some reason, to me, dots are grounding. And this is what I'm trying to say too, is that each symbol, yes, you can look it up in the symbols dictionary, but if you get that the dots are grounding, then that's what that means for you today. So if the spiral, you look at the spiral and you think, well, I like spirals, but it doesn't feel like what you said, then that's fine. Just run with what comes to your mind. It's what your heart and soul need at the time. So what I'm going to do now is I'll grab a white pen. I usually embellish it with a white pen as well. My favourite white pen is a white Sino pen. This is a broad, Uniball Sino, Signo broad. And I will just do some white inside the hearts, because I think it needs it. I don't think it needs to be coloured in. You could certainly colour in your shapes if you wanted, but it's just to make it pop a little bit. And I'm just going to do a dot in here, so you can see just by doing that white dot, it's making this mandala pop out now. And I will fill in these dots to make them pop. You could do white, you could do gold, silver. Use any of those jelly roll pens. They're great for embellishing like this, and they're quite solid. So you could keep embellishing this for as long as you like. You can go in here and do other little symbols, which is what I've done in here. You can see I've filled in inside. In this mandala, I've gone back and done extra lines in here. I've filled the white dots in here. I've done extra sketchy lines on here. I've done dots in here and in here. Around this is where I wrote the text around this one. So what you can do now is just keep going. I'll keep going and finish this off, and then I will show you what we can do with this. So there's my mandala finished. I'll read you what I wrote around the outside. This just came to me as I was writing. I actually didn't end up using a quote. I just wrote what came to me at the end, and this is what normally happens. And this is why I love this process so much. So what I've written is, your inner compass will never lead you astray. Trust in yourself, believe in yourself, and be kind to yourself. Your soul's voice has all the answers you need. You are loved, sweet one, and you are heard. So I hope that you've actually, you're inspired to try a mandala. You don't have to do the painted background, but I find it a really good way as a jumping off point to do different things and to express your emotions. If you're using this as a journal page, you can actually have that as the center and then write things around the outside. You could put photos, you could collage around the outside and have this as the central piece. There's so many things that you can do with this. So if you had it this way, you can see that it doesn't matter with a mandala what direction that you've got it. You can, if that's your journal page, so this is A4, it's a bit smaller, then you could write all of your journaling around the outside. And sometimes what I would do, I could write it in a bold pen if I wanted to read it later on, or you could write it in a grey lead, a graphite pencil, so that you could see it in the background. It would add texture to the background, but it was also, you can see the mandala sitting on the top. So thanks for having me. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and I hope to see you online and in the classroom. I thank you for a great experience, and to Creative You and Larissa. Yeah, it's been great. Thanks very much.